A thriving region that was completely emptied in one generation. For most of us, collapse feels slow. We imagine decline taking centuries, cities shrinking, populations fading, history recording every step along the way. But some places didn't collapse slowly at all. They were thriving, productive, populated, alive. And then, within a single generation, they were almost completely emptied. Not conquered in a famous war, not erased by a legendary disaster, not abandoned after centuries of decay. They vanished while people were still planting crops, raising families, and planning futures. This story begins in a region that should never have emptied the way it did. Because everything was working. The land was fertile. The population was growing. Trade networks were active. Settlements were stable. By every measurable standard, this region was at its peak. And yet, when later generations arrived, they found something deeply unsettling. Houses without occupants, fields returning to wilderness. Entire communities gone, not reduced, not scattered, but absent. No mass graves, no clear destruction layers, no single explanation everyone agrees on, just absence. To understand how this could happen, we need to step back and look at what thriving really means. This region supported tens of thousands of people. Its soil produced reliable harvests. Its rivers and roots connected it to neighboring areas. Its settlements weren't temporary camps. They were established places with long-term planning. Children were being born here. Infrastructure was being maintained. Social systems were functioning. There was no obvious reason to leave. And yet, over roughly 20 to 30 years, the span of one human generation, population numbers collapsed. Not gradually, rapidly. What makes this even more disturbing is what didn't happen. There is no clear record of a massive invasion. No widespread evidence of cities burned to the ground. No singular natural disaster large enough to explain total abandonment. Instead, archaeologists and historians see a pattern that looks eerily calm. People didn't flee in chaos. They didn't leave behind piles of weapons. They didn't die where they stood. They left. But why would an entire region leave, together, in such a short time? One explanation points to environmental stress. Not sudden catastrophe, but pressure. Subtle changes, rainfall patterns shifting, seasons becoming less predictable, harvests failing just often enough to break trust in the land. At first, families might have adapted, planting different crops, storing more food, relying on trade. But when stress compounds, year after year, thriving systems can flip quickly, especially when population density is high. A region doesn't need to starve completely to become unlivable. It only needs to become uncertain. And uncertainty changes behavior. Another explanation points to disease. Not the dramatic kind that leaves mass graves and historical records, but something slower. Something that weakens communities without wiping them out overnight. Repeated outbreaks. High child mortality. Lower life expectancy. Enough to make people decide that staying is riskier than leaving. But again, disease alone rarely empties an entire region. So researchers began to look at something less visible: social collapse. Thriving societies are efficient, but efficiency comes with fragility. When trade routes break, even temporarily, when leadership structures fail, when belief systems stop making sense of suffering, people don't always revolt. Sometimes they migrate. And migration, once it starts, accelerates itself. A few families leave, then more. Then entire settlements decide there is no future here anymore. Within a generation, a region can go from full to empty. Not because everyone wanted to leave, but because no one wanted to be the last one staying. There's another detail that makes this case even stranger. The land itself didn't become permanently uninhabitable. Later populations would return. They would farm the same soil, build new settlements, live where others once lived. Which means whatever caused the exodus wasn't a simple environmental death sentence. It was something tied to that specific moment, that specific society, that specific balance. And when that balance tipped, it didn't tip slowly. It collapsed. One of the most haunting clues comes from what was left behind. Not valuables deliberately hidden, not emergency stockpiles, but everyday items, tools still usable, homes not stripped bare, infrastructure abandoned mid-use. This suggests people expected to return, or believed they were leaving temporarily, but they didn't come back. Whatever decision pushed them out was strong enough to override generational roots, but not strong enough to trigger panic. That combination is rare and dangerous, because it means collapse didn't feel like collapse at the time. It felt like a rational choice. A temporary move, a better opportunity elsewhere, a solution to short-term pressure. Multiply that logic across thousands of households, and suddenly a thriving region empties itself. No single villain, no single event, just a cascade of reasonable decisions. And that may be the most unsettling part of this story, because it challenges the way we think collapse happens. We like to imagine warning signs, clear moments of no return, dramatic endings. But here, the ending was quiet. Generations later, historians would debate what happened. Archaeologists would reconstruct population curves. Researchers would argue over climate data, disease markers, and social models. But the people who lived through it likely didn't think they were witnessing the end of their world. They thought they were adapting. This region didn't fall because it was weak. It emptied because it was interconnected, optimized, and vulnerable to disruption. Once the system stopped working perfectly, it stopped working at all. And the speed matters, because a generation is short. Parents left. Children grew up elsewhere. Memories faded. Roots were cut. Within 30 years, an entire way of life was gone. Not destroyed, not erased, just discontinued. Today, when we see abandoned landscapes, we often assume centuries of decline led there. But this story reminds us that disappearance can be fast. That thriving doesn't guarantee survival. That collapse doesn't always announce itself with fire and noise. Sometimes it arrives as a series of sensible decisions made by people who believed they were protecting their families. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, the region was already empty. Not because no one wanted it, but because no one stayed. And that raises a final uncomfortable question. If a thriving region in the past could empty itself in one generation, how many signs would we notice before it happened again?